Today, we're going to look at 3 stories about 3 normal people who at some point made decisions that at the time didn't really seem like that big of a deal, but those decisions quickly changed their lives forever and affected the lives of millions and millions of other people. But before we get into those stories, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right place because that's all we do and we upload once a week. So if that's of interest to you, please sneak into the like button's house and dump out their Mountain Dew and replace it with pickle juice. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. Okay, let's get into today's stories. One afternoon in 2009, a 38-year-old man was sitting inside of a manga cafe in Seoul, South Korea. So a manga cafe is a lot like a normal cafe. You can go inside and buy snacks or drinks and socialize, do whatever. But also, in manga cafes like this one, they have these big in-store libraries that contain manga. And manga are like comic books. Now, this man did not have a lot of money. And so when he went inside of this cafe, he didn't buy any drinks or food. He just went up to the in-store library, grabbed an edition of his favorite manga series, and just sat down and began to read. Now, this man had read this particular series multiple times. He just kept coming back to it because he thought it was like the best manga you could possibly read. Now, a lot of people actually didn't know what to make of this particular series. It was actually kind of controversial because it was so over-the-top violent, like well beyond any other series. But to this man, that sort of made it stand out. It made it sort of special, and he loved it. In fact, it was so crazy, this series, that every time he read it, it allowed him to sort of leave his life for a second and just totally escape into this wild, violent story. And right now, in this man's life, he really needed that escape because his real life was pretty terrible. He had spent practically his whole life studying and working to try to become a professional writer and director. But in Seoul, the entertainment industry was pretty unpredictable. And so this man had successfully landed a couple of jobs here and there, doing some writing and, doing some directing, but they were small gigs and they typically fizzled out at some point. And so over and over again, like right now in this man's life, he found himself back in the same position he always was in, which was unemployed. At the moment, this man lived with his mother and his grandmother. But even though all 3 of them were pooling their resources, they still struggled to just pay for rent. In fact, recently, the man had to sell his laptop, the thing he used for all of his writing. It was like how he was gonna eventually crack a career in entertainment for real. He had to sell that just so that they wouldn't get evicted. And if that wasn't bad enough, the man had also begun taking out all these short-term loans with high interest rates just to pay for basic needs. Forget rent, like just food and basic necessities he was taking out loans for, but he had no way to pay them back. And so the debt was just piling up nonstop. And so for this man, the stress was like unbearable. And the only way he could find to even begin to cope with it was to escape into his manga books. And even though he knew that didn't solve his problems, he didn't care. It was like, life is so bad, at least briefly, I can read manga and escape. And so that's what he was doing today. And so he took his favorite manga booth, he sat back inside of the booth and just allowed himself to get sucked into the story for the 20th time. He's read this thing multiple times. And so as he was reading this manga book, he suddenly has this epiphany. Now, this man all the time came up with various story ideas that maybe he could write and would be the next big thing for him. But for some reason it was like, wait a minute, what if I write a story that's sort of, loosely based or at least inspired by my favorite piece of writing, this manga series? Like, wait a minute, I think I have a really good idea that sort of transcends any other idea I've ever had. And the more he thought about it, the more he realized there were other elements of his life that he could sort of attach to this story that's sort of beginning with this concept that came from this manga series. And so before long, he had put the manga book aside, got a pen and some paper, and just began writing down some ideas, general ideas for this new story he was gonna try to write. And for hours and hours, he sat in the booth just writing like crazy. And by the time the cafe was closing, he had this amazing outline of a whole world, this whole story he was gonna write. And he just knew this was the one. This was the thing that was gonna break him out of poverty and officially make him a successful writer. Several months later, This man had transformed that amazing outline into a fully realized project, and then he went out to try to sell it. And he's thinking, everybody's gonna want this thing. This is like an iconic, unique piece of IP. People are gonna be clamoring to buy this. But what he found very quickly is every buyer he went to hated it. They told him, this is simply too weird and way too violent. Like, this is well beyond what's reasonable. This is not something anybody's gonna want. Like, you will not have an audience for this. And the man was sort of crushed, because to him, it was so clear. This is an amazing idea. This story is so good. People that have experienced real poverty, who understand the lengths that people will go to make money when they are desperate, they'll relate to this. Like, there's a huge audience for this. But the buyers, they didn't see it that way. And so for the next 10 years, this guy kept trying to sell this story. I mean, he really genuinely believed in it, and he figured someone's gonna take a chance on this. They have to. It's too good. But for 10 years, everybody just kept saying, no, it's not good enough. No one wants this. But then, sort of out of left field, 10 years later, a major production studio actually said, you know what? This looks pretty good. We will buy it. This man's story was converted into a TV show, and it premiered in 2021, 12 years after the man originally conceptualized of the story inside of that manga cafe. And when this TV show aired, it was basically a global phenomenon overnight. It became the most talked about show anywhere in every corner of the internet pretty much immediately. It also made the production company that bought this story $900 million. And the man who actually wrote the story, he also got paid very well, and he won an Emmy. The manga series that this man read that sort of inspired all of this to happen was called Battle Royale. And in this series, these students are forced to fight to the death by a fascist government. And so what this man did is he combined that concept, fighting to the death, with something that he himself was dealing with in his own life, which was poverty. And he knew firsthand, the lengths he was willing to go just to make a little bit of money to make ends meet. And he knew other people who, were dealing with poverty were also sort of desperate. And they would go to great lengths just to make ends meet. And he said, okay, let's marry those two concepts. Poor people who were fighting to the death for money. The writer's name was Hwang Dong-hyuk, and the name of this TV series was Squid Game. As many of you may know, aside from telling stories on this YouTube channel, I also tell stories on my podcast, the Mr. Ballin Podcast, Strange, Dark, and Mysterious Stories. But that's not all. In addition to that podcast, under the Ballin Studios umbrella, there is a whole host of other podcasts that you can binge right now, and their content, all of them, fall into the Strange, Dark, and Mysterious category. For example, if you're into baffling and horrifying medical mysteries, well, you should go check out my other podcast called Mr. Ballin's Medical Mysteries. Or maybe you want to hear from some other voices within our studio, like Luke LaManna. Luke LaManna is a military veteran. He has a super iconic, really deep radio voice, and he has two shows. One is called Wartime Stories, where he basically looks at strange, dark, and mysterious wartime stories, and his other show is called Redacted, where he looks at information that used to be classified, and he dives into it with his military expertise and experience, and he basically shows you the lies and secrets and half-truths that the most powerful institutions in the world have been keeping from us. We also have shows that are just plain creepy and unsettling, like Bedtime Stories, hosted by Richard Weil, where he dives into the supernatural and cryptids and mysterious deaths. I mean, basically his whole kind of niche is things that keep you up at night. And then two other shows that fall into that sort of unsettling, creepy vibe are Late Nights with Nexpo, hosted by the famous YouTuber Nexpo, where he dives into true, crazy, scary stories. And then we also have another show called Run Fool, hosted by Rodney Barnes. And Rodney is like an icon in the horror genre at large. And on his show, he just dives into this wild, chilling lore, like horror lore. People love that show. Or if you're a history buff and you really want stories that are really rooted in the fabric of our timeline, I mean, stories that are truly historically accurate, but still strange, dark, and mysterious and crazy, well, check out A Twist of History, hosted by Joel. He's great voice. He's a very thorough host. Those stories all have really cool endings, big plot twists at the end. So if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious, go check out these shows. You can look for them either by name or simply by looking for Ballin Studios on any podcast platform. They are available right now. Enjoy. One day in the summer of 1953, a 30-year-old man named Sam Phillips was cleaning up his recording studio, which was located in a fast-growing city known for their vibrant music scene. Sam had just finished recording a church choir, and now he was getting ready for his next client. And so he was resetting all the equipment and cleaning up. But Sam didn't actually know who his next client would be or when they'd show up. Because Sam's recording studio was pretty unique. Because he was always on the hunt for new talent to sign, he had opened up his studio to anybody who wanted to come in at any time. All they had to do was show up, give him $4, and they could be recorded professionally. This did mean that a lot of times his clients were not very talented, but he felt like it gave him the biggest opportunity to cast the widest net to potentially find his next big star. So that day, Sam finished cleaning up the studio and resetting everything, and then Sam just sat down and waited, hoping that, another client would come through the door. And eventually, another client did. This young kid, he was 18 years old, he came strolling inside, he had a guitar slung over his shoulder. Sam had never seen him before, and right away he could tell the kid was pretty shy. And the guy came up to him and he just said, hey, I work as a truck driver, but I love to sing, I love to play the guitar as a hobby, and I just wanted to come in here and, record a couple of ballads for my mom. And so Sam, again, he took all kinds. He's like, absolutely, give me $4 and we can record these ballads. And so the kid handed over $4 and he went into the booth, and Sam's like, all right, you're on. And Sam basically expected this kid to do what most other clients of his did, which was, they'd begin playing and be sort of like not that good at their instrument, and they'd sing off key, and, Sam just kind of sitting there listening to this terrible music, just waiting for it to end. But with this kid, it was different. Once he began strumming his guitar and singing, it was like he totally broke out of his shell. I mean, he was, at first glance, a very shy, sort of reserved guy, but in the booth, he was electric. He was amazing. And so Sam sat there listening to this kid record his ballads and was just so blown away by how talented he was. And then when it was all done, the kid said thank you. He took his recordings with him and he left. And then once he was gone, Sam just made a point to make a note about this kid that just said, good ballad singer, save. Basically, remember this guy because I think he's gonna be something special. About a year later, in 1954, Sam was back in his recording studio and he was working with another client. It was this band and they were trying to record some songs. But as they were playing, they decided that they were really lacking another vocalist to round out the sound. And so they asked Sam, like, hey, do you know anybody? Sam's studio manager, who was in the room and overheard the request, immediately chimed in and said, hey, Sam, what about that 18-year-old ballad singer from last year? He was great. Maybe he could be the vocalist. And so Sam was like, yeah, I'll give him a call. So he called this young man and he was like, yeah, I'll jump in there and record some vocals. That'd be great. So the young kid, the truck driving, beautiful ballad singing kid came back to the studio. He hopped in the booth with this band and they began playing together and they sounded terrible. Now, the young man was still very much a great singer. Like Sam could clearly hear his voice cutting through all the noise, but it was like the kid and the band had no chemistry. I mean, they just met each other, so it's not that surprising. And the music that the band was trying to play just didn't really line up well with this kid's vocals, and so it just wasn't working. And so Sam clearly could see that. He couldn't really tell if the band or this kid could see that, and so he said, hey guys, for right now, just take a quick break. And so Sam ended the recording, and the band and the kid, they left to go get a drink, and Sam left the booth and went into the control room, which is basically right next door, but does not have a line of sight into the booth. And he was just in there to sort of collect his thoughts and just kind of reset for a second. But then at some point, he hears the sound of music being played back in the booth where he'd just come from. Except the music was different. It was really upbeat, it was fast, it was loud, and Sam could clearly hear the sound of that kid, the truck driver, the amazing ballad singer. He was just going to town, like he was singing at the top of his lungs, and it just really sounded like something was going on in there. And so Sam left the control room, ran into the booth, and he goes in there, and when he got in there, he saw the band and this kid just totally rocking out. It was like they suddenly had amazing chemistry. The kid, the truck driver, the amazing ballad singer is jumping all over the booth. I mean, he's totally into the song. And the band very clearly was sort of following the kid's lead. They were basically playing music to match the kid's energy. And Sam is watching this and listening to this, and he's thinking, I have never heard music sound like this before. Like, this is a new type of music that I'm witnessing. I mean, it gave him goosebumps. He couldn't believe it. Like, this is a brand new thing. The sound was sort of a cross between blues and rock and roll. It was a little bit too fast for blues and too slow for rock and roll, but it was something really unique. And all Sam could think as he's watching this happen and as he's listening to this is the kid, the truck driver, the ballad singer. He's the star. It's so obvious. Like, this is coming into being because of him. That's the person I've been looking for. That's the star that I've been trying to sign ever since I started this recording studio. And so that very night, Sam and this band helped the kid record his first ever single, which was called That's All Right. And once that song hit the airwaves, that kid did become a star, practically overnight. He catapulted into music fame that few ever achieve. He literally would become one of the most famous musicians to have ever lived. Sam's studio was called Sun Records, and it was located in Memphis, Tennessee. And the young kid, the truck driver who sang amazing ballads, was none other than Elvis Presley. On the evening of March 31st, 2012, a 40-year-old man named Justin was standing in the corner of a boxing ring inside of a convention center in Ottawa, Canada. He could hear the screams of hundreds of fans in the stands all around him, and he knew thousands more were watching him on TV. And Justin was pretty nervous, because this was not only the most important boxing match of his whole career, but it was also his very first boxing match of his career. His reputation and his future were riding on the outcome of this match, and Justin knew he was massively the underdog. Justin looked across the ring at the other corner, and he locked eyes just for a second with his opponent, whose name was Brass Knuckles Brazeau. He had served in the Canadian military, he had a black belt in karate, and he was notorious for packing an insanely strong punch. Hence the name Brass Knuckles Brazeau. And pretty much everybody who had been following this fight up to this point didn't just think, oh, Brass Knuckles is gonna beat Justin. No, the thought was Brass Knuckles is going to destroy Justin. And not just because Brass Knuckles has a reputation for a strong punch, but because Justin had a reputation for being totally soft and pampered and just not somebody at all that was viewed as being tough. I mean, the idea that he was even in the ring at all, about to, fight anyone, was a huge shock. I mean, Justin didn't seem like the type who could win any fight, let alone against this guy. And in fact, as soon as Justin had even entered the ring, the announcers, who were trying a little bit to stay neutral, couldn't help but begin making fun of Justin. They even quickly nicknamed him the Shiny Pony as soon as he came into the ring. Like, they couldn't even stop themselves from being like, who is this guy? Like, he's going up against Brass Knuckles. Like, there's no way he wins. But what nobody knew was that Shiny Pony had actually been training really hard for this match for months and months. And he felt like, despite what people thought of him, given the fact that he's nicknamed Shiny Pony here, despite his reputation, he felt inside like he was just as tough as Brass Knuckles, and he did stand a chance here. So when the bell rang for the first round, Shiny Pony got up and he charged across the ring and immediately just started swinging at Brass Knuckles. And none of them landed. Brass Knuckles avoided every punch and just managed to counter and destroy Justin pretty much immediately. I mean, he was pummeling the crap out of Shiny Pony, and the announcers are like, oh my God, he's getting mauled. But they knew it was coming. They were kind of laughing as they were saying it. And like Justin, he knows he's getting destroyed. He's not even trying to throw punches at this point. He's just trying to stay on his feet. And at some point, Brass Knuckles really squared him up and hit him right in the jaw with one of his famous right hooks. And Justin's like about to fall over, and right at that moment, the bell rings again, the round ends, and somehow, Shiny Pony's still on his feet, but barely, but he survived the round. And so Shiny Pony kind of stumbles his way back over to his corner, and Brass Knuckles very calmly and casually walks to his, barely affected by that round. And so for the next several seconds that the two men were sitting in their corners, Brass Knuckles is basically just relaxing until the next round starts. But over in Shiny Pony's corner, like, the medic is working on his face because he's bleeding everywhere, and Justin's coach is telling him, oh, you gotta do this, you gotta do that. But for Justin, it was like he had gotten so smashed during this round he could barely even think. But despite all the noise and the chaos, all he could think in his head was, I can't give up. They think I'm that guy that's gonna get pummeled and beat, and no one's gonna ever let me live this down. I have to go into this next round with reckless abandon. I have to find a way to just stay in the fight. I have to go all in. And so the bell rang again, and Justin, the shiny pony, gets up, and again, he goes across the ring over to Brass Knuckles, except this time, when he starts throwing punches, they land. And surprisingly, it was like every single punch he threw, it was rocking back Brass Knuckles. He was taking hit after hit, and Justin knew, like, this is working. And Justin, like, he can't believe it, but he's just riding it out, like hitting him as hard as he can over and over. And the announcers, they don't even know what to make of it. Like, the shiny pony is coming out here, being the rumble pony here, just destroying Brass Knuckles. And so when the bell finally rang after round 2, it was Brass Knuckles who was barely on his feet, stumbling back to his corner, and it was Shiny Pony, who was, winded, but totally fine. And he went back to his corner, and it was like everybody was in shock. Like, wait a minute, now it's 1-1? Like, this guy's supposed to be a coward, a weakling. Like, how did he do that? And so this time, in the few seconds between rounds 2 and 3, Shiny Pony is in his corner, and he's looking across the ring, and he's staring at Brass Knuckles. And Brass Knuckles was kind of like averting his gaze. He looked totally gassed. He looked scared. Like he couldn't believe he was potentially about to lose to the Shiny Pony. And for Justin the Shiny Pony, that was all the motivation he needed. He knew mentally he had an edge in his opponent. And so when that bell rang for the 3rd round, Justin got up and he went over there to Brass Knuckles and just pummeled him. Just over and over, blasting him in the face. And eventually he struck Brass Knuckles in the nose hard enough that his nose kind of exploded and began bleeding everywhere. And the ref actually had to step in and separate them. And even though, both men actually were down to keep on fighting, the ref said, nope, this is too much. And he ended the fight. It was a technical knockout, and Shiny Pony had won. Now, as much as this victory was huge for Justin, the truth was, Justin was not trying to become a professional boxer or really be in the boxing world in any capacity. This was actually just a charity match. And, Brass Knuckles Brazeau also was not a professional boxer. These two had just simply come together to have this match in order to raise money for charity. But Justin had another goal. He knew that his reputation in Canada was of being this sort of soft, pampered, weak guy. And he thought, if I can just get in the ring with a really formidable opponent in Brass Knuckles Brazeau and hold my own and maybe even beat Brass Knuckles in this fight, even though it's for charity, if I can do that, that could potentially sway the public's opinion about me. He was hoping that this fight could basically transform his image and people would see him as, tough and a serious leader. And that is exactly what happened. After this fight, when he won the fight out of left field, nobody could believe it. It was like he was the talk of Canada for a little while there. They're like, oh, look, Justin the Shiny Pony is actually, a little more serious than we thought he was. He's a pretty tough guy. And so Justin would use that momentum from the fight to eventually land the one thing he wanted more than anything else. He would get elected as the Prime Minister of Canada. The Shiny Pony's full name was Justin Trudeau. Now, I know what you've all been wondering. Where the heck is Seagull Lung? And what's he up to this summer? Well, let me tell you, he has been very busy. He recently graduated from pilot school, and apparently he was so good that he not only graduated at the top of his class, but upon graduation, he was immediately asked to come back and be one of their top instructors. And so naturally, Lungy and all his swagger and coolness agreed, and immediately he became the best flight instructor in the world. And so naturally, given how closely Lungy's incredible trajectory mirrors a classic 1980s Hollywood blockbuster film, the one, we decided to officially make Lungy the commander of our 4th of July summer blockbuster collection. And since Lungy has always been my wingman, I decided this time he should have the limelight and I will be his wingman. But in all seriousness, we do have a brand new summer blockbuster collection that's coming out that has our new t-shirts, okay, right here, the one I was just wearing, and this one, it's recognizing one of my favorite movies, the one, celebrating the 4th of July. We also have this nifty bucket hat. We have koozies, okay? Probably gonna get sued. I think there's a pretty good chance we get sued, and so don't know how long this stuff's gonna be online. But right now it is. And if you go to shopmrballin.com, you can get your amazing summer blockbuster Mr. Ballin merch, okay? Again, shopmrballin.com. Probably getting sued, probably getting taken down, so get on there as soon as you can, okay? Also, you might think that's the whole announcement, but it's not. I got something else for you. I'm gonna do a giveaway. I'm actually gonna be giving away this particular hat. Okay, I'm gonna sign it right here on camera. And so all you have to do is sign up for the Wondery newsletter, and you might be the lucky fan of the Strange, Dark, and Mysterious who gets this classic signed Lungy bucket hat. So all you have to do is click the link in the description below for the Wondery. I'm adding a little smiley face there, okay, so you know it's legitimate. Go to the Wondery newsletter website. The link is in the description below for your chance to win this sweet piece of history, okay? Go get it done. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you thought of today's episode in the comments. And remember, we have hundreds of videos for you to binge right now. But if you're looking for a recommendation from me of that one video that's worth your time, well, it's this one right here. So give it a watch. All right, until next time, see ya.